My name is Eugene Sinigaliano, and I'm here to let you know that I'm a senior who has lived with my family at 251 West 30th Street for over 40 years. I'm a member of the Empire Coalition, but I'm also the only at-risk of displacement individual that Empire State Development allowed on their Community Advisory Committee working group. I faithfully attended every meeting, so I have a deep understanding of how horrible their Penn Station project plan really is for New York City and commuters. I represent hundreds of residents, 400 businesses, and 10,000 employees that will lose their homes, offices, and jobs, with multiple city blocks destroyed by their outdated, fatally flawed, and special interest-driven plan. This includes destroying historic buildings, community services, existing cultural centers, and our beautiful 19th century St. John the Baptist church, shrine, and food pantry that is home to many Capuchin friars who serve and feed the poor. Eminent domain, eviction, destruction, misery, and the loss of an entire vibrant neighborhood are their goal. Penn Station is in desperate need of 21st century renovation and operation, but the railroads want to continue using and building inefficient, outdated stub-in terminal stations. Why? The reason is very simple. They do not want to work together or share fares. The proof is their highly preferred Penn Station Southern expansion, which will cost over $11 billion, but will be nothing more than another below-ground stub-in terminal station used by New Jersey Transit. This is just insane, massively wasteful, and devastates our whole community. New York and commuters deserve a better plan that puts transit first and foremost, with far more efficient through-running trains and a world-class above-ground station that is the center of a unified regional rail network. Simply put, commuters should be able to travel throughout the region on through-running trains using a single ticket, just like in other major cities all over the world and in the US. In addition, through-running operation would also provide significant capacity increases within Penn Station's existing footprint, negating the need to destroy the entire surrounding neighborhood. But the problem is the railroads are not listening to the public or doing what is best for New York City, its citizens, or commuters. The railroads want it their way, and they have made that very clear. We must all demand that the railroads be required to have an honest, solution-oriented expert review of through-running plans for Penn Station improvement, including the Rethink plan and any other solid plans that are made for through-running. What is happening is truly undemocratic, non-transparent, special interest-driven, immoral, lacks any equity, and is not in the best interest of New York City, its citizens, or commuters. The railroad's terrible plan for Penn Station renovation and southern expansion is not even workable and includes major issues between them and Madison Square Garden that are far from resolved. Anyone who went to the city council meeting or the board meetings saw the differences that both the MTA, the railroads, and Madison Square Garden still have that are not resolved and far from it. Their plan will destroy lives and homes, rob seniors of their legal rent stabilization, decimate businesses and jobs, destroy historic buildings, and cost New York taxpayers over $11 billion that no one even has. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, guys, to build a world-class above-ground through-running station for the 21st century for over 8 million New York City residents and 1 million of commuters. We can't waste it. Thank you so much. And Sam Turvey from Rethink is next.
Thank you very much, Gene. And while I didn't introduce Gene, he obviously is the moral force for democracy on 30th Street and has really proved to be a tremendous citizen advocate. As he indicated, I'm Sam Turvey. I'm the chair of Rethink New York City. I'm also the co-coordinator of the Empire Station Coalition, and I'm a coordinator of the Penn Community Defense Fund. I think you could have picked it up from our notices, but we opened with a member of the public, and we're going to intersperse members of the public. We're just trying to mix up formats a little bit, somewhat the way CNN town halls are. I don't want anybody to read anything politically into the fact that I plug CNN town halls. but we're going to try and mix it up a little. But frankly, while we have members of the public who are going to speak, we also have some tremendous transit experts who have signed up to speak. And we have at least one elected official, and we also have representatives of ASTM and perhaps others. We probably will even have a cameo appearance for Jim Venturi of the Rethink Studio. But let me get started with what I have to say. And I hope this format, while it may not be as linear as some of the others you've been participating in of late, I hope you'll find it user-friendly. Let me start by saying that I had a chance meeting with the author Robert Caro and his wife Ina a few years ago, but the friend who introduced us used only their first name, so I didn't realize who they were. My friend suggested I tell the couple my ideas about Penn Station, and I began by regaling them with my views on the need for a great above-ground Penn Station. Suddenly, it dawned on me that I was addressing Mr. and Mrs. Robert Caro, and I was flustered because Robert Caro wrote The Power Broker, and I'd actually read that twice. So I pivoted away from architecture and talked to them about our transit plan, the essence of which is through running at Penn Station. Trains would pass through Penn Station while originating and terminating in rail hubs on either side of the Hudson and East Rivers. I suggested this could correct much of the damage Robert Moses' excesses had done to our transit infrastructure, as Caro had so eloquently cataloged in The Power Broker. I could see that the Caros took an interest in much of what I said. Robert Caro called me that same day to ask more about through running. We had a great conversation. He confessed to me that his research on LBJ and the Vietnam War meant that transit advocacy was not in the cards for him at that time. It was very encouraging, however, and referred me to people who could help. Those referrals turned out to have many benefits to our cause. The conversation further motivated me to do what I could to help New York achieve through running. Through running, as many of you know, will provide the kind of connectivity to the far-flung parts of the metropolitan area that the subway provides to the outer boroughs. It is widely used in our international peer cities, as Gene said, and is increasingly the standard in major US cities as well. It will expand our region's core and make for a far more efficient use of resources. Through running represents a fair and more equitable use of transit dollars than what Amtrak, the MTA, and NJT are proposing. Through running was not invented by Rethink NYC and is not unique to Rethink NYC. There are other plans, and their proponents have been invited to speak tonight, and I'm delighted that some of them have taken us up on the offer. Our plan, as Karim Ahmed will explain, is likely to prove far cheaper than the expansion of Penn Station to the south, can be implemented while the station is operational, and does not rely on demolishing any of the neighborhood, including Block 780, which is where Gene lives. I repeat, absolutely, under Rethink NYC and a few of the other through running plans, there will be no need for neighborhood demolition. Our plan has many other advantages that you can read about on our website. While the conversion of Penn Station to through running will be truly transformational, it cannot by itself overcome the damage wrought by Moses. The gash in our cityscape known as the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, or the near mortal wound the Cross Bronx Expressway inflicted on the Bronx, to cite two examples, will not be fixed by through running. But through running can make a seismic change to the commuting experience, our environment, and the quality of life in this region. From within inches of the track beds at Penn Station, where commuters are waiting to board, to 75 miles out into the region's outlying counties, where residents will gain an ease and quality of access to the city that they have never known. What we have at hand is a once-in-a-century opportunity. Just as important, in adopting through running, we can show we have learned from our mistakes. The present plan to extend Penn Station to the south is a page out of Robert Moses' playbook and needs to be retired. The same can be said for the GPP, the Governor's Neighborhood Demolition Plan. It too needs to be retired. While we at Rethink began by advocating for through running for the benefits it would bring to area commuters, we also appreciate the importance of high-speed rail, which works best in conjunction with through running. The cities that have it right coordinate these efforts. Thus, we will also discuss the advent of high-speed rail in New York and invited members from the high-speed rail organizations. While several cities have converted to through running as a prelude to high-speed rail, our railroads are engaging in the antediluvian quest for more terminal tracks at Penn Station. Why don't we go back to the horse and buggy while we're at it, or invest in a BlackBerry instead of the latest iPhone? The differences are that significant. Our railroads tell us to be patient and to wait for the environmental review process in 2 years. Frankly, their analysis on through running have been vacillating, conflicted, and even wildly inaccurate. Alon Levy, fellow in the Transportation and Land Use Program of the Marin Institute at New York University, has called their lead engineering study a fraud on the public, and he was being nice. We don't think this question should wait 2 years, as the railroads suggest. All they will be doing is trying to bulletproof their point of view and preference for the southern expansion to Penn Station from litigation. The public in this city deserves much better. We continue to call for the appointment of a reliable narrator to review this matter. Many of us, myself included, think Andy Byford, who happens to be back from London and working for Amtrak, would fit the bill perfectly. It would be a win-win. Channeling Tina Turner, who we regrettably lost recently, he would simply be the best. If Byford finds the railroads are correct, most of the public will believe him and support his conclusions for the simple reason that he has earned their trust. If he were to find merit in through running, we could get the transformative rail operating we need and hasten great improvements to our quality of life, the environment, and the city's competitiveness. And so tonight, we will present you with some highlights of both through running and high-speed rail. These presentations will be relatively short. We want to hear your comments on these issues, whether you are a concerned individual, a transit company, or advocacy group, or an organization. We also expect a cameo from Jim Venturi, founder of ReThinkNYC Studio and principal driver of Rethink's through running plan. Jim will discuss how he believes our governance models and jurisdictional limitations are at the core of the Penn Station conundrum. Jim will point out how our commuter lines cross our state boundaries and extend beyond the jurisdiction of even the Port Authority. This presents tremendous governance challenges, and Jim will show us how London has addressed related issues. Again, please know we are one of a few plans for through running. We hope some of the proponents for other plans will make their views clear tonight. The fact that there are multiple credible plans for through running and highly qualified engineers supporting each of them is all the more reason to get someone like Andy Byford involved in this discussion so that we can quickly get to the highest common denominator for resolving this important question. So before we start with this panel, and just in case we have some folks who either haven't seen this or need a little reminder of what through running is, let's see the flyover that Rethink put together on through running in New York City.
At Newark Penn Station, the Northeast Corridor has 4 tracks, and passengers can connect to the path to Lower Manhattan. Here, the Northeast Corridor splits to Secaucus and the path to Jersey City. This creates a 2-track bottleneck. The Portal Bridge is part of the bottleneck, which Gateway would alleviate by adding another bridge. Secaucus Junction allows passengers on NJ Transit's Hoboken division to transfer to Penn Station-bound trains. Trains from these lines, however, cannot go directly into Penn. The Gateway proposal will loop in these lines. Gateway would also add a rail yard, which our proposal would use to allow some Long Island Railroad and Metro North trains to terminate at Secaucus. Currently, there are 2 tracks entering Penn Station from New Jersey, and 4 tracks going out to Queens. Gateway seeks to add 2 more tracks coming in from New Jersey, but rather than having them run through Penn Station and connect to the rest of the city, they will stop at a new terminal, Penn Station South. ReThinkNYC's plan improves on this by allowing the new tracks to run through existing Penn Station and out to Queens. By avoiding having to construct Penn Station South, we will also prevent the needless demolition of several Midtown buildings. Not only would Penn Station South require the destruction of the block directly to the south of the existing station, but also several buildings on the other side of 7th Avenue, as well as several on the other side of 8th Avenue. The 4 tracks from Penn Station exit their tunnels at Sunnyside. Sunnyside currently has a vast yard used by NJ Transit trains during the day waiting for the evening rush hour. Our plan would move this yard to the Bronx, freeing Sunnyside for a new station, park, and connected development. At Woodside, the Northeast Corridor again splits, with LIRR branching out to the east for the Long Island suburbs. This again leaves the Northeast Corridor with a two-track bottleneck. This can easily be alleviated by renovating the existing embankment, widening bridges, and adding 2 tracks. The Northeast Corridor joins here with the New York Connecting Railroad, a freight line. After this point, there are 4 track beds, but only 2 are used for passenger rail, and 1 is completely abandoned. ReThinkNYC would rebuild and electrify the 2 other track beds. This is true all the way through to the Hellgate Bridge, which was originally built for 4 tracks. At Port Morris, ReThinkNYC locates a station and a rail yard for some terminating NJ Transit trains. This is the last point in which Metro North's Hudson and Harlem lines can tie into the rest of the trunk line with the short tunnel. These critical changes we propose will give our city and region the base to build a truly unified transit system.
Our next speaker will be Robert Praviti.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Robert Praviti. Recently, Mysore Naharaja, former MTA Capital Construction president, and Howard Sackle, who formerly worked at Amtrak and New Jersey Transit and worked on the ARC project, we penned an op-ed in the Daily News about the importance of linking Grand Central and Penn Station. Long Island is now suffering from having their schedules thrown up in the air because, in particular, the Port Washington and Babylon branches, which were used to half-hour service, are now seeing hourly service. The MTA is going to go back. They're going to try to rationalize the schedules as they have been used by the public. And they're probably going to have 2 trains go to Penn Station for every 1 going to Grand Central. It's going to be less than ideal. I think the ideas of through running are fantastic. I think they're important, but without linking the second and probably the most important destination in the New York region, Grand Central, the problems on the Long Island side are simply not going to go away. And operationally, as a former operations planner at New York City Transit, I sympathize with the schedulers at the Long Island Railroad. There's no easy way out of this solution, out of this problem. The only solution is to figure out a way to link those 2 stations and have a core service that goes through there. Now, this doesn't mean that the other aspects of what ReThink has laid out are invalid. They're very valid. But it is a major destination. And to be able to get from Penn Station and or Grand Central to Connecticut, Long Island, New Jersey, and eventually maybe other places like Delaware and Maryland, it would be truly beneficial to have the link through there. Amtrak many years ago talked about different layers of their own service. Clearly, the predominance of their service will go through Penn Station and the existing East River tunnels. But they're probably, as I live in Philadelphia, to me, it's obvious that some Philadelphia trains, some Keystone trains, it should probably go through both Penn Station and Grand Central. And it's written in the Access to the Region's Core Alternative G. 36% of New Jersey Transit riders want Grand Central access. That is, out of the 200,000 pre-COVID people that went through the Hudson River Tunnel pre-COVID, that's 70,000 people. If we're successful and double the number of people coming into Penn Station, that would be 140,000 people. That if we have it the MTA and Amtrak's way, if we use the expansion of Penn Station, they're going to have a longer walk to the subway. They're going to crowd the subway. They're going to crowd the local streets. It would be best to get those people to their destination directly. It's one of the motivations for the Queen Elizabeth tunnel Crossrail in London. They wanted to decongest the underground. And it's one of the goals that we should be talking about here. It is a huge mistake in this discussion not to connect Penn Station and Grand Central. The amount of money that's going to be saved by avoiding construction of a street level station is huge. And then if we're able to get underneath Penn Station and get Amtrak to design a terminus under and say, oh, we'll do this at a later date. What's going to end up happening is what happened at East Side Access. And at East Side Access, there's 8 terminal tracks. At 24 trains an hour, that's 20-minute dwell time under the most expensive real estate in the world. It's way overbuilt. At Penn Station, New Jersey Transit only would need, if designed to be connected, 4 tracks. It would be 1 cavern underneath Penn Station and go a half a mile to Park Avenue South to connect to East Side Access. So Mysore, Howard, and I have been for a very long time now talking about this and suggesting that we start with the idea that these two be connected. It relies on through running, as Rethink is discussing. Well, as we are witnessing right now with Long Island, the public doesn't understand this stuff. All they know is, I have hourly service now, not half-hour service. And the only way you can fix that is to connect whatever is built at Penn Station as part of the Gateway Project to Grand Central, and specifically East Side Access. And the reason East Side Access is really ideal over the old Grand Central Terminal is that the old Grand Central Terminal is not ADA compliant. The East Side Access is a sunk cost. It's there. It's ready to be plugged into. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Robert. And look, at Rethink, we understand that there are other plans and proposals and thoughts about how these things can be done. And we hope to sit down and compare notes. And look, what I say to, I'd heard more about this plan from George Akalis and John West. And I think you bring up the right things. Dwell times, we want to know what cost figures are. And the big thing is, whichever plans go forward in the EIS or the environmental review, if we don't get to this sooner, we're going to need real specifics, or the people favoring Penn South will fill those blanks in for us. So we look forward to learning more about your plan. Obviously, we favor hours, and we may graze some of that this evening, but we very much appreciate your coming here. And more importantly, we appreciate that a group of engineers are saying that through running can happen, because there's been a lot of squawk that there's no engineers that will raise their hand and say yes about this. And so there's some other engineers will be on tonight, including Dr. Paaswell. And we're next going to Jim Venturi, who's speaking on behalf of the Rethink Studio, and he may have some things to say about this as well. But
Bob, Praviti, I'd be happy to discuss some of these things with you. I wanted to talk, I guess, about 2 things. One, I'm happy to answer about the option G that we're talking about. I like very much and respect very much George Akalis and John West, and this has been a disagreement between us. My understanding is that option G is tied to going to the Metro North level, which is the lower level of Metro North, and it was looked at by Parsons Brinkerhoff at the time. Those slopes are very different than the very deep East Side Access. Separately, East Side Access has low tunnel heights, and therefore you can only have single level trains. George's view was that you would have 2 tracks at Penn Station that would go through and a very wide platform to deal with the vertical circulation. Bob, you mentioned 4 tracks. Presently, those platforms are too narrow to be able to have through running, and that's why our plan has wider platforms. But you lose 30% capacity when you go from a single level train to a double decker train that New Jersey Transit presently has. And double deckers also don't work in the present New Jersey Transit MLVs into Grand Central, and it's ambiguous whether new ones could be designed to fit within the upper level Grand Central. I'm not talking about East Side Access. So I think it's an ill-fated idea on a technical level, but I think there's a larger issue, which brings me as a nice segue into the what we call the bigger apple. And again, I guess the way I like to think about this is, if you imagine in 2000, the transit planners that are responsible for the transit networks or the urban planners or what have you were responsible for the development of the smartphone at the time of the BlackBerry, where would we be now in relation to smartphone development? And I think I'm not comparing myself to Steve Jobs, but I have an IT background, and I tend to look at things a bit differently than, let's say, how the RPA has. And we also looked back at the consolidation of New York and how that led to the creation of the subway and turned the 4 boroughs that connect to the subway into a growth from 3.5 million to 8 million. Last I checked, it's 6,000 a month on average for a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan and 10,000 for a 3-bedroom apartment. It's unsustainable. Many of the same problems that we're experiencing now in New York were experienced in the 1890s leading up to the consolidation of New York. Andrew Haswell Green, who's remembered for being forgotten as the follower of Greater New York City, started in 1865, and it wasn't taken seriously until 1890, those efforts. The logic of runs, as we call it, is really the same logic of any other city. I'm in London now, and the Elizabeth Line, Crossrail, the main thing that drove that was not transportation. For decades, there were proposals associated with through running that were tied to transportation. They went nowhere. It was the Canary Wharf development and the need to be able to connect the entire region's labor market and all the different connections of the different underground lines that the Elizabeth Line connects to get to Canary Wharf. That was the main driving factor. In other words, land use was the most important thing driving that connectivity, that additional connectivity. It's the reason why North Station, South Station, Boston won't happen, because there's not a land use plan associated with it. I too am from Philadelphia, and the Center City Tunnel was relatively inexpensive at a different time, and we're finally getting the harvesting of it with the Schuylkill Yards project. You wouldn't have Schuylkill Yards if it weren't for the former Reading lines that connect into 30th Street Station because of the ability to connect to those areas. So I think that's really important. Earlier, I don't know if it's possible, Sam, to bring back that slide of London and New York. Yeah, so I think this is our central premise of through running, even though it looks funny. It's a Google Earth at night diagram comparing New York and London, and with the red as kind of the core of New York, the little pink area in Manhattan below 59th Street, roughly, and then London's central activity zone on the left. What you're looking at is the political boundaries of London, of the Greater London, which was expanded in 1965, although the Green Belt in 1938 pretty much banked those limits. What you're looking at is a central activity zone that is at the center of the political boundary, and you're looking at it mostly in dark space at night. In New York, what you have essentially is a division because of the 2 states and all of that. So that means that you have 2 different sets of political divisions, and then on top of it, You have responsibility divisions between economic development, land use, transportation, and such. So as long as the conversation is simply about transportation, then we're not really able to address that issue I mentioned earlier about the cost of rent, and also the fact that Amazon had to go to Long Island City because there wasn't contiguous office space, or that the present proposals are to demolish our heritage in Midtown and create a kind of Dubai and such. I don't think the idea of adding more Dubai around the Grand Central area by stimulating that area is a good thing for New York. I found that a lot of people who share my views agree with that. Our plan essentially is to do what the RPA proposed in 1931, which is to create secondary centers in around Sunnyside, as well as in Newark along the Northeast Corridor, and turn that into a trunk line. That would allow us to basically double the office space of Midtown Manhattan in both locations. But to do that, you have to think of the region as a whole. William Wilgus had proposed an interstate metropolitan district in the 1910s. That became the Port Authority, but it wasn't nearly as much as what he said. It's only 1,500 square miles versus the 1,900, et cetera. Our plan, the Bigger Apple, is the idea of doing something similar with public authorities as a means of which to solve the root problems that we need to compete with cities like London that do have their transportation systems correctly. And they have them correctly because they're thinking about land use more than just the central activity zone and in a bigger picture of what's going on. And I think unless you actually move your mindset towards that bigger picture, we're always going to be debating the sort of small issues like, should it go to Grand Central? And really, we've outgrown Manhattan as a single core. And that's the essence of what we're talking about. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Jim. And thanks for peering with us. And look, I think there are going to be many issues like this that hopefully we can all sit down and handle. And there are some philosophical questions that one group may favor one development model and one group may favor another. So we'll look towards that. And for those of you who don't know, Jim, I referenced it earlier, but Jim really is the founding of the Rethink New York studio, a group dedicated to transit and infrastructure governance issues, and really the driving force behind Rethink's through running plan. Dr. Vuchic, why don't you go ahead and we'll continue to try to work this issue out for Tony Simone, our assembly member, who it's really wonderful he's here. We just, there's some issue we're not resolving, but go ahead, Dr. Vuchic. Dr. Vuchic.
Oh, okay. Well, what happened was that as the cities grew and the suburbs grew, there was a great need to provide faster rapid transit on the regional basis, much longer than the subways. So from 1930s on, city after city were building more lines which were more diametrical, going from one suburb through center city with several stations, usually the center, and then out to the other side. That happened in many cities. In Munich, for example, they brought two bunches of branches to center city and connected and provided regular services throughout the day. The ridership went from 150,000 a day to 600 a day. A city after city then were extending stub-end lines to around center city to the through lines that go diametrically from one suburb through center city to the other suburb. Now we have about 24 cities which have built such connections. And that was in Frankfurt, in Paris, in Zurich, and in Philadelphia we have one, good example. Now, what about those diametrical versus stub-end stations? Well, comparing, should one have stub-end stations with through stations, it's very drastic. The diametrical stations, diametrical lines have through stations with 2 or 4 tracks, the headways can be 2 or 3 minutes. If we have a stub end station, it's about 12 to 20 minutes between two trains. So that city after city have built these diametrical lines through the city. The ridership was attracted and very successful. What about New York City and United States? Philadelphia really has a classic example where we have diametrical lines connected through Center City with 4 tracks, and now having much more efficient system. Boston needs something like that also, and they've been talking about it, but just couldn't finance it yet. What about New York? When New York has these 3 major corridors, right? New Jersey Transit, Metro North, and Long Island. It would make sense to provide also travel from New Jersey to Long Island and to Connecticut and so on. Why is it not done? It's not even discussed. Here we have corridors, we have tracks, but there is no cooperation between these 3 groups. So if you try to go, you live in New Jersey, and you want to go to Long Island, it is so complicated. There is no assistance even in the station for information, so that it is so inconvenient that people living in Connecticut and working in New Jersey or any others, they're driving now, and we are not even discussing how should we make a unified network and connect these branches or facilitate transfers. So by all criteria, the diametrical lines are vastly better than stub end lines. Actually now, I haven't found one city in the 40 years to build dead end stations in Center City except New York City. And you see New York City, the Madison station now is way over designed. Billions have gone extra for dead end tracks. And then the scandal with doubling the headways on Long Island lines, that should have been seen 20 years ago. This is now disaster what's happening. So diametrical lines have lower investment and lower operating costs, and they are much more convenient than stub ends. Now, stub end was already built in Madison. Now, if they would build another such stub end station, that would make it impossible even in the future to have some trains going from New Jersey directly into Connecticut or Connecticut to Long Island and so on. The Trans-Hudson Tunnel is our biggest national public project that is really needed to be built, but to be built so that it is used rather than stub ends of tracks. So,
Dr. Paaswell, I need to get to the next speaker, but look, I didn't introduce you properly. Dr. Paaswell is a professor emeritus from the University of Pennsylvania.
Vuchic.
Not Dr. Paaswell, I'm sorry. Dr. Vuchic is really the world's leading expert on through running, and we are honored to have him here. And we will allow you to come back on, and we really appreciate that. We'll have some more questions for you. I do have an assemblyman who I had promised to get on. So I hope I cut you off at a logical point, and we will bring you back because we definitely want to hear about what you have to say. And also if you have any questions for the panel, that would be terrific. Is that fair enough, Dr. Vuchic? Okay. So sorry for the disruption. Next, I would like to introduce somebody who's proven to be a great friend to through running, and that's Assemblymember Tony Simone. Tony, you're on.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Rethink Penn, for inviting me tonight. So far, the discussion has been fascinating to me. I've learned a few things. Hopefully we can teach that, educate our friends over at the MTA and the other folks involved on this plan. Look, for a long time, I think we all felt the needs of the station have not been addressed. They have not been listening to the communities. For too long, we've heard about one commercial development, not enough about the entire purpose of this whole thing, this whole project. Building a new Penn station we can be proud of that works for all of us, a fabulous Penn station that puts our constituents and commuters first, not a developer and not some grand scheme plan that displaces residents or businesses. I just want to specifically thank the voices like Sam Turvey and Rethink Penn. This conversation on how to actually improve the transit aspect of the station has been elevated because of all of you. We all know we need a new Penn station. We know that we need light and a great streetscape and a beautiful station that everyone wants to go to in the near future because it'll be with us for the rest of our lives. And the design of a new station, as everyone knows, I don't need to tell them, is just only one key piece. We've seen many exciting new ideas come forth as of late on how that can look. But what lies beneath the station leaves so much more to be desired. If we don't truly look at the tracks and platforms beneath Penn Station, how we connect Penn to the region at large, we will have missed the greatest opportunity to increase passenger capacity of our lifetimes. And I feel like the conversation has moved by all the advocates who've been working on this, many who I believe are on tonight. Why do some prefer demolishing over an entire city block to expand Penn to the south when there's this thing called through running, which I fully support from day one, that the rest of the world has discovered? New York City shouldn't be behind the curve on this. Why does this function between all the different railroads continue to lay a great transit future? We cannot let bureaucratic turf wars hold us back. This is too important. Egos cannot get in the way. We need to do what's best for our transportation hub. And I'm done hearing excuses for why we can't have through running here. Look at SEPTA Railroad that crosses through Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. 3 states. We only need to connect 2. I'm glad everyone has joined to learn more about through running tonight. I learn more and more about it every day, and I hope it can truly change how we travel in our region. So I want to finish off by thanking you, Sam, Karim, Christine Berthet, I see on there, and Professor Paaswell, for continuing to spread the gospel of through running. I know we have to keep pushing and fighting. One person at the MTA told me what's possible, what's impossible. We don't want to spend this much money. How many times have we heard the MTA told us it would cost something and it went way over the budgeted price? We made the biggest mistake by tearing down the original Penn Station. Hopefully this will give us the opportunity to not only bring it back to the grandeur it should be, but that it serves constituent and commuters first, not a developer, not some grand scheme to do things in a shortcut way. And I know we have a limited time in the next year or two, but thank you for all your work. And thank you for letting me be part of tonight.
Thank you so much, Tony. Sorry it took us a little while to find you.
No worries, I learned a lot.
Okay, our next surprise guest, and Nick, we are going to get to you soon, and Peter Cipriano, but we have a special guest that we'd like to make sure that we get to. I mentioned him earlier. I believe he's on, and Andy Byford, you are permitted to speak.
Hi, Sam. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Andy, we can. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, look, thank you so much for including me in this conversation today. Let me just put the camera on, actually. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm using my wife's computer. Well, first of all, I mean, I'm honored actually to be on a panel, or not on a panel, but in a conversation with people that I regard as absolute luminaries in the transit space, people like Professor Paaswell, people like Dr. Vuchic. These are luminaries to me in the field of not only transport planning, but in the particular area we're talking about today, namely through running. I was very encouraged to hear Assemblymember Sim talk about the benefits and also the benefit of avoiding demolishing a beautiful part of New York City, which, although I live in DC now, is a city that is so dear to my heart. You know, I feel I'm an adopted New Yorker. I love that place, and it would break my heart to see beautiful buildings torn down on 8th and 7th Avenue when they don't need to be. I should say at the get-go that I'm not speaking on behalf of Amtrak. I'm speaking just as a railway professional. I've worked in transit now for 34 years. But I just feel this is a golden opportunity, and the Assembly member mentioned that. And one of the other speakers also mentioned the benefits of through running and made reference to what happened in London. London learned that lesson. There are effectively two cross-London railroads. There's the Elizabeth line, which I had the pleasure of opening with Her Majesty the Queen back in 2022. And that has been transformative in that where people used to have to jump on the Central line, had to get off at Paddington and then go down to the Central line or down to Lancaster Gate and go through Central London to go to East London to Liverpool Street and then go out the other side. Now they don't have to. The Central line has been immediately relieved of pressure, and you've got a state-of-the-art, very high speed actually for through service, state-of-the-art railway under the wires, beautiful stations, air conditioned, which at a stroke has been a game changer from London, connecting not only the key parts of central London, but also Heathrow Airport, Paddington, Liverpool Street, Canary Wharf, and the City of London. It is a game changer. People in Frankfurt, people in Amsterdam, people in Paris, and dare I say it, New York, are probably gnashing their teeth because that was a game changer for London. Well, I live in the States now. I'm going to be an American hopefully in a few years' time. I want to do my bit for the States. So it seems to me that this is a golden opportunity for the US and for New York City to have something similar to the Elizabeth line, to have something that has that economic regenerative impact in New York. And then the other corridor, of course, was Thameslink. That predated or preceded Crossrail, but that's the north-south corridor. There again, once upon a time, you used to rock up in South London and have to get on the tube. You'll be getting on the Vic line or you're getting on the Northern and have to go up to Euston or King's Cross to go north. Now you don't have to do that. And what London has seen is the benefit of that cross London traffic and that through running, because you've got not only the economic benefit to the city, but the knock-on effect, north, south, east and west, of businesses popping up, of housing being developed, and of relief to the existing transport line. So I don't know how this is going to pan out. What I would say, Sam, is good for you for at least calling the question. This is a golden opportunity. It's not just about building something that's more aesthetically pleasing, important though that is. You know, Penn Station's kind of an embarrassment, but you can't fix it by just putting in a few light boxes, by just heightening the ceilings, by just widening a few corridors. If we're going to do all of that, why not take the opportunity to fix the damn thing once and for all, which is, I'm going to say, get rid of the pillars, which means move MSG, but at the very least, do something with the track configuration to enable through running. So that's it. That's my pitch. I do stress that's my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of Amtrak. I don't know all the facts. If if it was the case that someone asked me to have a look at this, I'd be honored to do that. But I'm just speaking as a private person who cares about New York City, who cares about the States, and who's seen what good looks like, along with people far smarter than me, like Professor Paaswell and Dr. Vuchic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Robert Praviti's got some pretty big credentials too, and Mr. Venturi has his own set. But Andy, I don't expect you to get all that. And look, I think you have, if you need any sponsors for your citizenship, you look for the people on this call. Panelists, does anybody have a quick question for Andy before we lose him? I do want to get to Nick.
But just one quick question, because he mentioned MSG. When they redid St. Pancras, did they consider putting the Wimbledon tennis courts on top of St. Pancras?
You're on mute, Andy. We may have lost Andy, but in any event, we had him for a little while, and this is recorded and good for that. So we have our public panelists have all had PhDs. We will get to our panelists soon, but Nick Messino, are you signed in? And we will get to you. And then we'll get to Peter Cipriano, and then we'll get to Dr. Paaswell.
Hi, are you ready for me?
Yes, Nick.
Look, I'm all the way out here in the countryside. I love it out here. There's farm fields for miles still in New Jersey, New York. Every city in the country really has the same problem. The problem that I've dealt with is suburb expansion, the expansion of the highway and suburb system. There's nothing that destroys farmland and destroys open space more than the suburbs. And, it's not the suburbs' fault, it's their choice. Suburbs are a beautiful place to live. It's beautiful to get in a car and get on a nice highway and drive into the city and work. So New York is, in my opinion, the best city in the world. Obviously, I live in New Jersey, so obviously I'm biased. But if we want to put any sort of dent in the suburb expansion and have any hope of densifying the population, and you have to give people something that they want to choose. And the plan that you brought, I've been following this on Instagram, is the most important plan in America right now, in my opinion. It will be the most important plan for New York City for the next 100 years. So I just hope you got out here. I helped stop 14 warehouses. I helped redesign every single Dollar General in South Jersey by public action. And I just hope you guys, feel strength in your design and you push it and you get what New York City deserves. That train station is beautiful. You should get on a train. Love getting on that train, get to New York, love getting into New York. That's what's going to sell the office space. That's what's going to sell return to the office. Any way you want to put it, I just think it's so important. And thank you for letting me come on and give my perspective. I'm out in the country. I'm not as buttoned up as some of these guys, but thank you for everything you're doing. It's so important. So important.
Next, thanks so much. And post-COVID, none of us are buttoned up anymore, but we really appreciate your joining, and we really appreciate your perspective. And just know none of us have any quitting us. So
good.
We're next going to go to the lead of a transit organization, Peter Cipriano, who's with the ASTM firm, who, as many of you know, is proposing a rehabilitation of the existing Penn Station, albeit with Madison Square Garden still there. But there are some important points that I want people to remember before Peter speaks. They're not asking to tear down the neighborhood in order to build this. And I'll let him speak to through running or other issues. But in our communications with the ASTM people, they are real communications. And I'm very appreciative that Peter chose to join us. So Peter, all yours.
Sam, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and it's nice to see so many new friends who slowly but surely I've been getting to know a lot of the people on the call. I want to also congratulate you on getting Andy Byford tonight. You make waves and the ships move, I guess. It's really, really great. It was great to hear from him. And just again, congratulations to all of you for the amount of perseverance and hard work that you've been putting into this civic conversation. A little bit like Andy, if I could speak for myself for a moment and not ASTM, I think you all pretty much know what ASTM is trying to accomplish. Yeah, we have what we think is a better, smarter way to deliver a redeveloped Penn Station building which is super important, right? The quality of the station, the experience that people have in the station, the experience of the folks who have to live with the station because you either work or live in the surrounding community. That is one really important conversation. But this through running one really is as well. And all the experts that you have had and the assembly member, it is enlightening. And there is tremendous logic to it. I hope, Sam, that you all can draw more federal attention to the issue, only because, as I think I discussed with you recently, that just by virtue of our system, which Jim Venturi spoke to very eloquently, it's an interstate commercial issue. There is a state line at the river where, maybe there shouldn't be, but that's definitely what we got. So to the extent that you can get the feds, whether it's the FRA or the Northeast Corridor Commission, or even get one of the congressional committees to commission a study, I think that would be really, really useful, because getting the two states to do it and agree to do it's just rough, right? That's just the reality of it. So I hope that you can do that. And I'd point out also that Amtrak, they are, of course, a through running railroad, and they're running trains from Boston to Washington. And I think to some extent they're dealing with the constraints from their tenants. So I hope all that's helpful. But beyond that, of course, what we're trying to do. As I said, our focus is on presenting a plan for financing, design, construction, and long-term maintenance of a new Penn Station building. We believe that our design is totally consistent with through running should the railroads choose to adopt it. So of course wouldn't be a developer's choice or decision, but our design would absolutely be adaptable to the type of platform and track reconfiguration that would need to occur. So I think it's important that we get a great system, and it's important that we get a great train station. We're seeking a big open competitive RFP process for a master developer right now, which I know we're getting a lot of increasing support for, and we're really excited that the governor is open to new ideas, and we appreciate everyone's attention to what we've been putting out there. So thank you again, Sam, for having me. Happy to answer any questions if that's your format.
Anybody have any questions for Peter? I think we're good, Peter. And look,
okay,
we're going to keep the communications very open, and it's a two-way street. And on behalf of the various hats I wear, I want to acknowledge the respect you've shown us by appearing, and we do greatly appreciate it. Buzz, can I let one public speaker go, and then you're on, and then I may get to our speakers and then come back to the public. But our next speaker will be Lynn Ellsworth.
Here I am.
Okay.
Got my voice. Dialing in from Paris, where my daughter has a transit pass for $80 a month, 80 euros a month, that allows her access to a vast region around Paris that I'm sort of sad we don't really have that in New York yet. So I'm wearing my hat as co-coordinator of the Empire Station Coalition with Sam, but I'm also an economist and think about Jim Venturi's plan here as an engine of economic growth. And, one of the great puzzles in economics is what causes growth. And we don't know. It's not population, it's not this, it's not that. We can't really prove causality. But we do know that education and lower transit costs seem to be highly correlated with economic growth. So a regional unified transit network you guys talk about it as connectivity. This is the secret. This is what we need to be doing. This spreads economic growth opportunity around an entire tri-state region. What that does is it lowers the time that people are spent in travel. Time is money. That means we have greater possibilities for economic growth spread out rather than just concentrated into 2 areas of Manhattan. And, that's equitable economic growth. I kind of am perplexed why the governor isn't just jumping on this like the great secret she should have to make her popular. All 3 governors actually should be on this: Connecticut and New Jersey and New York State. Others have spoken about the need to have some kind of third party come into this morass. And, earlier on in the coalition, we talked about having an economic study look at the costs and benefits of through running. And I'm a real cynic about cost benefit study. The methodology is really terrible and often fake. But I think in this case of through running, we need that kind of demonstration of the power of economic growth in a regional unified train network. So we need a third party to step in and kind of weigh in on this. So as I understand it, we can't really have a regional unified train network unless we have through running. Like, it's a prerequisite. So I'm all in, as Sam knows. So I'm delighted to hear all the other panelists speak.
Thank you, Lynn. I know it's late in Paris. And look, some of you have sent us note and said you're going to let the public speak, and the public isn't speaking. I have to tell you that our panelists aren't speaking. A lot of the folks who you're hearing from are members of the public who happen to have PhDs or substantial transit backgrounds. I didn't know Andy Byford was going to join us. I learned Dr. Vuchic would join us a little earlier, and Dr. Berthet. So we're glad to have them. They are members of the public, but we are going to keep getting members of the public in. We will get to Dr. Paaswell, and then we'll have a couple members of the public. Go ahead, Buzz.
Okay, thank you. First of all, it's great to be here and hear already on the table so many of the ideas that coalesce to sort of make the case why high-speed rail is important. And I think I'll have to ram it over. First of all, when I start teaching transportation planning to my students, I tell them in 2 sentences, I can tell them what it's all about. Transportation creates access, and access creates value. That was Jim Venturi's talk. And then the last talk we heard about, you can find out the benefits from access. You can do good cost benefit analysis. Perhaps we'll have to have a little session when we go over the tools to do that, but using input output models and other kinds of things, that's too much for here. You can do that. But let me talk about high-speed rail and why I think it's important in this discussion. So maybe we can, I don't need I know what I look like. We don't need my picture on the, we get to the next slide, please. I want to say I got involved in this discussion in the beginning because, one, I didn't like the original developer presentation to let's put up all kinds of towers and build what I called a reverse moat around Penn Station, a reverse obscene moat around Penn Station, and then take some profits from that and fling it at Penn Station so that a governor will think, oh, what a great asset this is. New York is all of our city, and New York is an iconic city, and we want to keep New York, New York. It doesn't mean it has to look the way it does now or in the 1930s pictures or anything else. It's to each of us what living in one of the great cities in the world really means, and we don't need it drastically changed by some poorly thought out development plan. So I got involved in that, and I thought we need some world-class thinking about the development around the region, and we need some world-class thinking about the redevelopment of Penn Station. And why do we need it about Penn Station? Penn Station has been here for a long time, as we know. McKim Keaton White did a beautiful job, and everyone around the world knows what Penn Station is. It's a destination, but it's a destination for who? It's a destination in a sense for tourists or for people who are looking at the history of New York. Penn Station is a place that people go through. It's It's for people who are coming or going to someplace, and the travelers want to minimize their cost of travel. And to minimize their cost of travel, they want to get as quickly from one point to another, and using that savings in travel time, they can achieve that. If we have one chance in our generation to rebuild Penn Station, we should think about what is it going to look like, not during the rebuilding, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, when people are saying, oh, those people in 2023 made great decisions, or oh, those people in 2023 just said, let's rebuild it as a 1950s station, put in some more lights, as they said, and everybody will be happy. That's not what we want. This is a chance to rebuild it in the right way. And it's going to cost money to do that. And you're not going to have another chance in 2 years to say, whoops, we made a mistake. Let's redo A, B, and C. Let's do it right. And my feeling, one component of building it right is making it accommodate high-speed rail. High-speed rail is either coming to the United States, or the US is losing a great travel opportunity. For all of you, I think most of you who read news on the internet know that yesterday there were over 1,000 planes that were canceled because of weather, and that's a daily occurrence. And around the world, in Europe and in Asia especially, they understand that high-speed rail is a great alternative to air, especially for trips that are shorter than 500 miles. In fact, in Paris, in France, they're going to push laws or regulations that saying trips under 2.5 hours must be made by train, and they have a great high-speed rail network. And I just wanted to show that high-speed rail can look great. High-speed rail Madrid, which is probably one of the greatest in the world. Madrid to Barcelona, 16 high-speed rail trains a day, all sold out. The airlines aren't doing as well. And then London St. Pancras, and I was being facetious when saying St. Pancras was built and it didn't have to accommodate the Wimbledon tennis courts on its roof, whatever that refers to, of course. And Madrid didn't have to accommodate the Madrid Football Club pitch on its roof. These are places of travel, High-speed rail trains are traffic generators, they're destinations. And if you read the history of the impact of the high-speed rail in Europe, the European Union has a high-speed rail network that cities are bidding to get on because they all know they present economic opportunities. London to Edinburgh, or London to the north of England have high-speed rail, and it's made the other cities with banking and finance and real estate much more valuable. So we can say that we need high-speed rail not only as a traffic generator and as a way to reduce the cost of travel. Hold on, don't go too fast. As a way to reduce the cost of travel, we need high-speed rail to bring the country closer together so that travel pairs and travel can be less costly to the traveler. And you can a good example that I like is Shanghai to Beijing now takes 4 hours by high-speed rail. Shanghai to Beijing is the same as New York to Chicago in terms of miles or kilometers, however you measure it. And you can see that if you could go from New York to Chicago in 4 hours, New York to Boston an hour. And one of my dreams that I've been talking about for 20 years, if we had high-speed rail or even a Acela going the 150 miles an hour that could really go, you could go from New York to Albany in less than an hour, and there should be trains between New York and Albany every hour, every 2 hours. So you just walk up to a station and get on the train and go, rather than the complexity of going through terminals and things. So high-speed rail is the future of transportation. It's a major future of transportation. It's competitive with airlines. It's competitive with short trips. It's being planned. These are These are plans for high-speed rail across the United States. We all know that California is building high-speed rail, and we're learning lessons from California. We're learning about NIMBYism, about real estate, about wasted cost, about moving, about equipment that doesn't work. It's a great test. LA to Las Vegas is a surety. That's going to come up. Chicago to St. Louis soon. The Texas high-speed rail soon. And in Florida, they want Orlando to Miami soon. So we're going to begin to see high-speed rail. But if Penn Station, if we say we want to design Penn Station, and what should we tell people like Peter Cipriano or others who are developing this? Here are some attributes that we want. One is we want through running, and the other is we want to build the station to accommodate high-speed rail with all that means. And there's enough stations around the world where you can see the kinds of infrastructure you need for it, kinds of signaling, the kinds of ticketing systems, the kinds of information systems that you need. And I don't want to go on much longer, but I just want to emphasize that it's all about access. That should be trips less than 500 miles, by the way. It's all about access, and the more access we have, the more valuable city pairs are, the more people will use it. So it's coming. If the United States does not embrace high-speed rail, and the European Union has, much of Asia has, we'll soon wonder if New York can stay, as we like to think it, the great financial capital of the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Buzz. That was really terrific. And look, other cities very much do these. Even in this country, they happen more at the same time. There's a lot more communication between folks. And while other cities are looking at high-speed rail as the next leg of the journey past through running, we're looking at Penn Station to go to terminal tracks. And that's really sad and somewhat ridiculous, but enough from me. We do have a member of the public, I think, queued up. And we're going to have two members of the public, and then we're going to get to Karim. I think we'll go right to you, Christine, after Karim, and then we will finish with all public.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Louis Bailey. I'm the manager of membership and organizing at We Act for Environmental Justice, and I run a transportation working group. As we know, Penn Station is the busiest transit hub in the country. We know that. But let's stop calling it world-class, because what we are not in transportation is world-class. We talk about access and equity, but our Rockaway residents don't have a direct line coming through when there is a fully line already built for them to come in. The last 20 years, there have been multiple transportation projects, and they're all in Manhattan. What about our Rockaway folks that need to come into the city when there's a line already there? What about our Co-op City people to come into the city? So when we talk about transportation and equity, there is no equity. The Oculus, the 2nd Avenue subway, Grand Central, we're doing all these projects in Manhattan. What about the rest of the network? Forget Jersey and Long Island. What about the boroughs and why they don't have the access that we're talking about? So I just want to make that clear that I'm for transit for everybody. And our Rockaway folks have been dying for years to get that line reactivated. And it's already there, just needs to clean up. But yet we spent, what, $18 billion to bring in the Long Island Railroad folks to come into the city? What about those guys? I agree the plan is flawed here. Sam, you have my backing on that. This plan that they're doing right now is flawed. We definitely need through running, because it's definitely woefully short of being a real transit hub. What we have down there is a maze of chaotic, catch me if you can. And I've been abroad. Okay, I've been abroad, many cities abroad. Okay, if you've been to Sweden, everything is in Stockholm that you need, from regular public transit to the express lines to the bus network. If we're going to talk about expanding the network, we're getting ready to do Port Authority as well. What about Port Authority? Why can't we connect Port Authority to this big grid if we're talking about it? But again, I say it over and over again, what about the other boroughs when we talk about transportation? Every project in the last 20 years has been done in Manhattan.
Well,
What about
Well, Louis, let me say, look, point taken. And if you saw the video earlier, there would be some work done in the Bronx and in Port Morris. And COVID ended some of the conversations we're having, but we got very positive feedback in the Bronx. And I want to tell you, I have lived and worked in every borough. I cheated because I was born on Staten Island. But I sold shoes on the Grand Concourse and Fordham Road for 3.5 years to get through college. And you know, shoes are one means of transit, and I got pretty close to that part of things. But we agree with you, and we, you know, this connectivity, frankly, the plans Jim has for connectivity would connect to this new Brooklyn Queens line that the governor's talking about in a way that would really.
But that doesn't help Rockaway liners. It doesn't help Rockaway liners.
Jim may have to come back on. I'm sure he probably has.
I just wanted to say,
but I can speak to that as well.
Karim, I'll let Karim speak to that because
because the Rockaway has a line that's already there. We don't have to build anything new. The Rockaway line is already there, and they've been clamoring for a good 10, 15 years to get that done. But let me just finish, and I'll give it back to you.
Okay.
New York City commuters deserve better. Through running is the way to go. Like I said, I wanted to add the Port Authority bus terminal because we keep doing transit projects isolated. They're getting ready to do the Port Authority bus terminal sometime in the next 5 years. Why not add that into the mix right now and get all of it together, okay? And my last closing point, we're going to be judged by what we tear down and not what we build. We already know what we did to Penn Station. We tear things down to build things new when we can just like repurpose what we already have. So my always thing is to what I believe is MSG has got to go. I don't care what anybody says, it's got to go. There's no other transit hub that has a doggone facility, a sports facility sitting on top of it. It's the only one. It should never be that way. Thank you so much. And Sam, I'd like to invite you to speak at my transportation working group. I think you're a great guy and you have a lot of sense.
All right. Well, you can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate that because this is a lot of work and I take a lot of shots to the head. So things like that really help me out. Karim, do you want to respond to the one Rockaway point?
Yeah, I would. I will say towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to speak about some initiatives that could change that even before through running is implemented. But the Comptroller's Office put out a really interesting study in 2021 during COVID, talking about how transit patterns are changing significantly. And one of the things they proposed was to have a reduced fare for outer borough commuter rail lines, and that would help things like the Rockaways so that instead of strictly being limited to the subway, you'd also be able to have a reduced fare to perhaps the Far Rockaway branch of the Long Island Railroad, to be sort of an express route into the city, and could be an alternative to some of these, strictly just the subway and bus neighborhood.
Thanks, Karim. And I did see something on, I think it's called LIRR today, and this one person had a boatload of through running ideas. And we're going to keep pressing for more connectivity, and connectivity does not equal terminal stations. But enough there. We have another member of the public, and then we're going to get to Karim and Christine, and then Bill Borak and some other members of the public. Please raise your hands or send us something in the chat. We really want to make sure to get as many of you on as we can. We may go a little after 8:30, but I don't want to stay too long after that because I know we've had you all a long time. But Steve, you're on. You unmute.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for hosting this informative and great meeting. And Andy Byford, that was phenomenal. You got so many smart people, and you are fighting against so many bad plans that have been put up before you guys started trying to stop these bad plans. Like the bad plan of destroying the Hotel Pennsylvania. I'm also hearing, like, every time somebody says, well, where would the garden move? Where would the garden move? And nobody ever says where it would move. How about between about 28th Street and 34th Street, around 10th and 11th Avenue, there's about 5 or 8 blocks that are completely vacant with Con Ed trucks sitting there. They're using them for parking lots. I mean, that's one place. How about the Javits Center, which gets used twice a year for a car show and Comic-Con? Anyway, I want to really thank all the people who talked about not destroying an entire block that I've lived on for over 40 years that has a 150-year-old church that feeds the homeless. Everybody talks about all the great things Madison Square Garden does. I don't ever see them feeding the homeless. I mean, the blight is Madison Square Garden and Penn Station. They've been trying to seize our block by eminent domain, saying it's blighted for the last couple of years. Now, if you lived on a block that, you know, billionaires were saying is blighted and we're trying to destroy your block, would you get kind of stressed out? That's why we've been at the governor's press conference at the top of our lungs and with a lot of signs letting these people know we're not happy about it. I don't know what's going to stop these people. You know, I mean, these people are still have this plan and they have never said yet that our neighborhood is not blighted. And you know, and the ASTN plan does not say they're going to destroy our block, but what are they going to do to destroy it? What is this gateway thing that has to be rerouted or stopped or reconfigured to not destroy our block to make it a terminal for Amtrak and New Jersey Transit? So, I mean, those are just some of the things I'd like to know about. And again, as you know, 30th Street is a historic music block, whether they want to admit it or acknowledge it or not. It's actually one of the last major music blocks left in Manhattan. Again, when I moved in my building, Tommy Ramone lived there. There's a building on the block, the music building. It still houses the New York Guitar School, where Eric Botcher, our councilman, whose office is coincident on our block.
All right, Steve, you're gonna let me get the panelists on.
Block.
You know, Music Street does have an amazing history, and we lost Harry Belafonte this year, and he had a loft down there, recording loft and a loft for his clothes. You know, so colorful block. But look, we're going to get to Karim and Christine, and then we're going to get only take questions till a little past 8:30. But go ahead, Karim.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, almost evening now. And thank you to our public audience for joining us. We've got a great introduction from some of the previous speakers. I'm going to get into some of the details about how much the projects cost, how they can be done, and why this is all like very important. I think the previous question about access is sort of paramount. Slide, please. Okay. And following up from the images about the Empire Station complex and the demolition of Block 780 that was referred to just in the most recent member of public speaking, I want to get into the costing of this project proposed by the railroads. Slide, please. Would you the acquisition cost and the logistics of building a huge subterranean structure from the busiest blocks in North America? It costs to build Penn South and Empire Station complex that the railroads proposing. Cost is astronomical. Slide, please. By the railroad's own admission, it would be dramatically cheaper to outfit half of Penn Station for of course, they acknowledge there would have to be some systemic improvements throughout the region that would supplement the improvements at the station. Slide, please. ReThink's proposal is a bit more extensive. We propose converting the entirety of Penn Station to a through-running station, and we would also need to make those systemic improvements. I saw a question in the chat. I'll address that in just 1 minute. Slide, please. But even then, the cost of such a project of going for a through-running station will be significantly less expensive than what the state and the railroads have proposed for Penn Station South and the Empire Station complex. Slide, please. And give a sense of what this would look like from an operations perspective. Here's how we would actually get this project done. We've developed a sequence of 10-stage implementation process at Penn to extend all the platforms in order for these platforms to accommodate through running. You can just kind of press slide, keep pressing them every couple seconds, please, for the next few. The first few stages of our plan can be done immediately. They're improvements to the existing station and interlockings. The following stages can really only be done once the new Hudson River tunnels and systemic improvements outside of Penn Station that I mentioned earlier are completed. And you can see as we go slide by slide, in each of these phases, we widen one of these plastics, it becomes this dark gray color. And throughout this entire process that we've designed, there would not be any decrease in the overall service in the station. And in fact, it turns the second half of the stages, increases in service and through running can actually begin. And here we're coming up on the last couple slides here, and the completed station. And most importantly, I want to just take a couple minutes. We really don't want to lose sight of why we're proposing all this in the first place. To get to the question earlier about the need for improved transit. Naysayers through running claim that there isn't purpose or demand to create through running models of transit. They say that Manhattan is such a draw, people are going there, they're not going other places in the city. They've said the same thing about London, they said the same thing about Philly, and now they're saying it in New York. In those two successful examples, service demands actually exceeded expectations. In other words, there was more demand for through running than was previously modeled by the railroads at those times. And we have no reason to believe that that won't be the case in the New York region as well. Due to industry and employment trends in the New York region, these were further exacerbated by changes in commuting patterns in a post-COVID world. The old model of the 9 to 5
Seems like you're having some stability issues, Karim. I mean, your computer.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. You froze a little there.
Okay, I'll turn my video off. It might be better. And because of the way that yard regions and scheduling works, a through running system is a better fit than a terminal system at providing round-the-clock transit service. On the left here, I have a graph from a Times article from 2021 showing much flatter commuting trends across the day on subway and bus transit compared to before the pandemic. So you can see that top line, it's sort of a light red, and then you can see the very flat line at the bottom, and then you can see the one that's darkest in the middle, 2021. That's basically showing that in April 2019, almost a year before the pandemic hit, there was a huge swing between your peak commuting hours and the middle of the day and the middle of the night. Obviously, when the pandemic first hit, people were very scared. There was hardly any transit. And the sort of trend as people started returning to work was a flatter trend, where there's not a huge difference between the amount of people commuting at rush hour, or what we traditionally call rush hour, and throughout the rest of the day. And to the right, I have the first page of a 2021 Comptroller's report. They studied the same topics and arrived at a similar conclusion for all methods of transit, including commuter rail. Basically saying that we're entering a period where we're beyond just talking about rush hour. The report even went so far as to suggest, as I mentioned in the question earlier, that the commuter railroads should offer discounted tickets within the 5 boroughs to make trips more financially accessible. And a really important piece is that this is a transit equity point, is that there are a lot of neighborhoods that shoulder the burden of transit infrastructure, but because of the price of a commuter rail ticket compared to a subway or a bus ride, they don't benefit from the burden they hold. Really important point. There's lots of the Bronx, Queens, some parts of Brooklyn that shoulder a lot of transit infrastructure and industrial areas, whether that's noise that's created, smells, pollution, anything, but they're not really reaping the benefits of that connectivity. The railroads say there isn't demand for a through running system in the region, but they're the ones who don't acknowledge the transit demands today. They, from NITIC studies dating back to 2000.
Your audio is not working well, Karim.
Those studies showed a large demand for morning and evening rush hours. This is my final point, so I want to drive it home. Can you just take it back one slide? Thank you. The railroads say that there isn't enough demand for through running system in the region, but they're the ones who don't acknowledge the transit demands today. They base their modeling of transit in the region from NIMTIC studies dating back to 2013. And at that time, those studies did show a latent demand for morning and evening rush hour rides. That's what they designed Penn South for. But we're not in 2013 anymore. Anyone who's lived here for the last 10 years know the city has changed. It's time for the government agencies to design for the new reality we live in. Thank you. And I believe next we have some more audience participants.
We're going to go right to Christine and then go to the audience participation. Go ahead.
Oh,
Well, before I say go ahead, Christine, as you can see, her position with the Community Board 4, and people like Christine and Layla Law-Gissico who couldn't be here tonight, and all the community board members. I'm amazed at how much time and effort they make. And Christine has a specialty in transportation and has really been both an advocate and a challenger to any and everything we say in a very positive way. And I'm really pleased to have her with us tonight. So go ahead, Christine, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sam. And I have to give it to you that what you have created at this movement is absolutely amazing. And I think we're going to win. So let me go, let me go to the next slide. Can you change the slide? Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'm not going to repeat to you all the wonderful things that the through running does. It seems to all of us that it is an absolutely logical thing to do. But imagine you go, there are two things that need to be done. Is first of all, you're going to have an $8 billion surgery. I guess you want a second opinion. And my point is that we absolutely must have a second opinion on the design of this station. This is not an option. It's too complicated. It's very challenging. And the people who are going to give us their guidelines right now are really biased. So it is too much money. There is too much at stake for having only one opinion. We need an independent consultant to advance the design. And this is something we have put the Community Board 4, put in the letter to both governors in February 2022. And the second thing is, you know, we are all discussing this current plan, and the governors have separated the rebuilding of the current station from the extension of the station. But imagine that you are redesigning your house while you know you are going to have one more children or two more children. And how does that make sense to not plan your current redesign with those elements in the plan? So we cannot let the discussion of the expansion of the station to be postponed, because if we do that, it will be a guarantee that there will be a destruction of multiple blocks. The only way we prevent the destruction of those blocks is by studying how to do through running in the current station. And as everybody has said, we want to have a pretty station, but you know, if the plumbing doesn't work, that's not going to help us. So those 2 points are really fundamental in my mind, and we cannot be losing our perspective on that. I think we are all, this is summarizing the benefits of through running. Everybody said it much better than I can, but the real process now is an issue, and this is like getting a new consultant and not, I mean, really integrating the through running, and how do we give the expansion within the existing station. So keep up the good work. This is great to see so many people interested in this subject. Thank you.
And you keep up the good work, Christine, and thanks so much for being with us. Well, I think a member of the community would like to speak next.
Yes, I wanted to speak about something that hasn't come up yet. most of the people who come in in Penn Station are commuters. And there's a tremendous traffic in that region. They come in on the railroad and they run for the subway. My suggestion would be that the number 7 line go out to Secaucus. Then we wouldn't have everybody coming in just to the one spot. Once they got on the subway, they could go anywhere they want in the city. I think it would be much better for the neighborhood, that neighborhood around 34th Street, and it would be much more efficient for everybody else. It's not my own first idea. I did read about it quite a few years ago when somebody was talking about this, but extending the subway into New Jersey, into Secaucus, would be much better for the commuter and for the people who live in the area.
And I take that, Sam.
Yes.
Yes, Olive, I worked on this project, on that project specifically around 2013, when Bloomberg did build the 7 extension in Hudson Yards. The plan was to extend it to Secaucus, and we were very excited about that. But after that, because of the competition for funding between this and the Gateway project at the federal level, it was deemed that extending, doing the Gateway project was more important, and therefore that project of the 7 was dropped off.
Do you think we could, do you think it's time now that we could reconsider it?
I think it's a matter of timing. You know, right now we are all focused on getting Gateway going and getting Penn Station fixed and the network. And there is also the Port Authority project going on. So maybe this is not the time and we should wait a little bit. And once those big projects are underway, we should reconsider that.
Well, it seems to me with it seems to me that with Gateway, there's the way of getting under the Hudson. Or
no, Gateway is really for the rail, and the subway would have a different alignment, and it is a different structure to do the subway. So you cannot merge those two things together.
Well, what about the Lincoln Tunnel?
Well, Olive, actually, there are people who have discussed different types of rail links. There is a group in New Jersey that favors extending the 7, and there's a group affiliated or close to our hearts that are thinking that really the Port Authority bus terminal shouldn't be this big bus terminal, and it's silly to send buses through the Lincoln Tunnel. But I think we get a little afield from what we're talking about, but not necessarily too far. So you know how to get in touch with me. Get in touch with me offline, and I'll make sure you know who some of those folks are and that we can talk more about that. But
all right, thank you very much.
It's certainly a solid question. Do we have another question? Yeah, one of my favorite people in the whole world, I know I shouldn't say that, but Pam Wolf, who elegantly told the city council that she went to Michael Todd and Elizabeth Taylor's wedding at Madison Square Garden, but not this Madison Square Garden. It was the one up on 8th Avenue and 50th Street. So go ahead, Pam.
Well, thank you, Sam. This has been really fascinating. I have very little to offer to this other than because I'm so much in agreement with everything that everybody has said. Through running is the no-brainer of the century. Lynn and Christine both brought up the concept of an outside consultant to be involved with this. I'm going to speak the quiet part. What do we have to do to get Andy Byford in that job? Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. We have our last question from the public, and then I am going to go to some closing remarks. So William Reed, you are on and ready to go.
Hello, everyone. First of all, is my camera on at the moment, or is it just audio?
It's just audio.
Oh, well, but basically, first of all, thank you very much for hosting this session, and especially for the guest appearance by not only Andy Byford, but also ASTM, who's been making the news recently for providing a design which I've seen the renderings of that versus the MTA design, and I feel that ASTM design is trying to focus more on the columns a little bit more to look like to look like MSG rather than the old Penn Station or something new like Moynihan Train Hall. But that's my opinion. That's besides fact. It just so happens that I work for an engineering firm in the greater New York region who was actually discussing unofficially through running as well as the reconfiguration of Penn Station, because a bunch of different people have been talking about it, a bunch of different people have been proposing renderings. Heck, there seems to be a new rendering of Penn Station every day of the week throughout the summer. But basically, some of the questions that I have regarding through running, I understand the benefits of it. I definitely see the success of it in cities like Philadelphia and Munich and practically a bunch of other cities in Europe. But one of the main things that that I'm concerned about is the grade of Gateway as well as the lengths. Where exactly you'll be running these trains? I mean, I saw the map on ReThinkNYC, and apparently it wants to bring New Jersey Transit to Port Morris, Bronx, and move Sunnyside Yard to Port Morris, Bronx, where the available real estate isn't really as large as Sunnyside. And not only that, but I personally feel that extending New Jersey Transit to Long Island might be a better option because that would be an easier way to utilize through running. Or you could simply have New Jersey Transit to Metro North, to places like their New Haven line. But the thing that makes through running in Penn Station especially difficult, and I don't mean to play devil's advocate, is that especially if you want to do anything outside of overhead electric territory, you need different equipment. You probably need tri-mode diesels and rail cars that go from third rail to overhead and maybe even to the diesel. And I guess another thing in regards to Gateway, especially to go back on another point, I know it may seem like a lot because I took notes throughout the whole thing and I'm trying to answer as much as I can. But in regards to connecting Penn Station and Grand Central, and this is a big one, I think some companies have looked into that before, but they weren't able to do it, one, because of the grade, and two, because there are a bunch of water mains and other piping underneath. So I assume there have probably been a lot of projects in the past that definitely looked at connecting the two, and I absolutely see the benefits of connecting Penn Station and Grand Central, but there's a lot of engineering difficulties that are involved with that. And to go a little bit west of Penn Station, in terms of Gateway, the reason why that doesn't run parallel to the existing Hudson River tunnels is that technically Penn Station was built near a cofferdam, as well as a bunch of other walls that were put in place at the construction of the original Penn Station. And those walls absolutely cannot be broken. So you're pushing a inner city rail tunnel all the way underneath that wall. And the grade to go from that to the existing Penn Station track level is simply too steep. That's the reason why Grand Central Madison was built so far deep, because the tunnel from 63rd Street that went all the way up to Grand Central was way too steep for the multiple units, even coming in as far as 20 blocks north. But I just wanted to list some of the engineering constraints that were mentioned earlier, and these are definitely aspects that should be looked into when referring to through running. Since I understand the concept, I definitely appreciate it, but you also have to factor in various engineering projects or engineering tasks that are involved with expanding service to Penn Station. Oh, and to answer the Chairperson's point about moving Madison Square Garden, move it to the remaining open space at Hudson Yards. You could easily cover that over.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for the
Can
question, and I'll get right to you, Karim. I just wanted
I was going to just answer.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was just worried about your sound. Your sound sounds great now, so I will back off and I'll finish
great.
You answer the question.
Yeah, there was a similar question in the Q&A. I've been going through them. But yes, we have definitely considered electrification standards. So there are precedents already throughout the region of changes where a single train will change electrification standards. And we've spoken to Bombardier, who is the manufacturer listed for the new rolling stock for the Gateway program. And one of the things they told us was that they can install transformers to allow trains to accept both a catenary and a third rail hookup. And they said you would just lose one to two seats in the train car because they needed a little more space for that extra transformer. But in the presentation, when I was mentioning earlier about having systemic improvements throughout. You know, we didn't want to get too technical in this particular presentation, but that is one of the things that we have considered as, or what we refer to when we were saying systemic improvement, are things like electrification, that we definitely acknowledge in our more thorough documents.
Yeah, but any and everyone, you know, please put questions to our website. And if there are questions you have for Robert Praviti, Vukan, Vuchic, any number of the people who've been on, we're an open book. We want people to be, we think an intelligent public is going to be the way, frankly, to win this thing. And, you know, we've had a lot of PhDs on this call, so we're all going to have to keep learning, you know, endless learners. But I do want to close the program now. I just have a few closing comments. That look, this is one of the statements of purpose from the Empire Station Coalition that I told you that I'm very proud to be a founding member of. And, you know, this, frankly, when you put all the mailing lists for all these groups together, it's a pretty good amount of people. And, you know, early on, probably in April of 2021, you know, we'd like the US DOT to halt the expansion south. And we suggest here, you can't see all of the things we're saying, but we really would like to get, you know, an independent consultant, I would say an honest consultant, you know, or somebody that we feel doesn't have their finger on the scale. And I hate to say that I don't feel that way about some of the other narrators that have been involved, but if we had more time, I could draw that out for you. To Mr. Reed, on your grade question, I suggest you look at Alon Levy's Pedestrian Observations article about Penn Station, and he really talks through some of the things that you're talking about. He definitely feels that you can do through running within the existing envelope of Penn Station and not do any of the demolition south of the station. But look, we had a guest appearance that surprised me tonight, having Andy Byford come on. I have had occasion to meet and talk with him. And as he said, he doesn't know all the details or all the facts that are involved in this, but he's certainly been involved with through running and seen all the benefits that it can provide. And he happens to be somebody that we know and trust. So I hope that the federal government will be smart enough to get him involved. And, you know, it should be a win-win for them, because if they're as confident of their engineering as they suggest they are, I think he'll come to us and say, Dr. Vuchic, Mr. Praviti, Dr. Praviti, you know, Dr. Nagahara, Dr. Paaswell, Mr. Turvey, you know, this doesn't work for X, Y reasons. And I think he might get an argument from some of the transit engineers, but I think, you know, facts have a funny way of working things out, and we need to get there. But if we got past what I think are some sort of bogus arguments that no sooner that we kill one, they raise another, it just seems like they're trying to tire us out. I think he might come back and say, hey, you know, you really can do this. It will save you a lot of money, and it will completely change the way that the region operates, make you much more competitive. We won't be losing jobs to the Southeast, to the Southwest, to Europe. And I know I'm biased, but why shouldn't we do that? So, you know, when I brought up Andy Byford's name, a lot of people thought I was grandstanding or that I had imaginary friends. So I am really glad that he joined the call. And, you know, some people have challenged me as a grandstander. Well, I'm like, look, when I press back on them, all I'm really getting from people is stop making sense, stop making sense. It makes so much sense. Why shouldn't we do this? So, look, I want to thank you all. I want to thank Andy for being on. I want to thank all the different transit engineers who've been on, all the members of the public, all the people who spoken. I'd like to thank Alyssa Paulo, our new intern at Rethink, who's helped us with this. And I can't name everybody, but really just terrific work. And let's keep at it. We have no quit in us, and let's be fair-minded and honest. And I agree with Christine wholeheartedly. We can win this. So best to everyone. Thank you very much. Good night. Thank you very much. Good night.